I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. All right, these MAGA folks are a cult of personality wrapped firmly around Trump. But behind the scenes, the people that we see on TV wearing the red hats and occasionally swastikas are not the only MAGAs. In fact, there are several MAGA Democrats. So we're going to look at the history of the phrase behind MAGA, the through line to 2025, the criteria for MAGA, and what Dems fit the criteria today. But this is probably just a part one. We're probably going to do more with this. So I'm going to play a video to set the stage so that we know what we're looking at.
Promoter of public-private partnerships. For lack of a better word, that is fascism. So then you have the family history of Klaus Schwab, that his father ran a Nazi model company and funded the atomic bomb and all of that, and just very complicated stuff there. And you basically have him being in this position where he's promoting, fascism on a global scale. I mean, he's a
white kitty cat away from being a James Bond Superman.
Well, but I think that's, they want everyone to focus on him and think that it's just him and just the World Economic Forum. There's other organizations that are promoting this too, and also a lot of the, the Young Global Leader program, that's not exclusive to the World Economic Forum. There's lots of other institutions with similar agendas, that sort of are related to the World Economic Forum, which seeks, not just public-private partnerships and fascism, but global governance. There's a lot of these organizations seating their people in certain places.
If you look at the FEC filings, it shows she's getting a lot of donations from Democracy Engine, but they don't tell you that that's just a vehicle to transport AIPAC donations. AIPAC doesn't donate to candidates directly, right? So it's a PAC. So it's a PAC that donates. Okay, we can say you have this number of PAC donations. But by doing it this way, this is basically AIPAC donating to a candidate directly by individual donations. Crazy stuff. Another thing that, let me show you what he mentioned here. Another thing that he mentioned here is that many of the donors had supported Democratic candidates too, sometimes donating to both Republicans and Democrats at the same time. See, anything to pursue the pro-Israel mission.
Well, sort of, that's what she said I did to her. She fainted with great emotion. She actually indicated that she loved it. Okay, she loved it until commercial break. In fact, I think she said it was sexy, didn't she? It was very sexy to be raped. Didn't she say that?
So, sir, I just want to confirm, it's your testimony that E. Jean Carroll said that she loved being sexually assaulted by you?
Well, based on her interview with Anderson Cooper.
It should be 100% of the black people should vote for Trump, because I did more for black people than any president other than Abraham Lincoln. It's true.
Trump and his cronies, including unelected, deluded, low IQ, ugly, socially awkward, loser, dork, billionaire Elon Musk, are stripping people of their rights, placing people in camps, invading our privacy, and gutting the federal government. And to those of you in my comment section saying personal attacks and name-calling undermine my arguments, no, they don't. No, they don't. I can bully Elon Musk and create sound legal arguments at the same time. Watch me. And yes, I'm going to be saying swears a lot in this episode because I'm mad. The uncensored version is available on my Patreon link below. And in response to this tyranny, this all-out war on democracy, on the very foundations of our country, of the rule of law and of the Constitution, our lawmakers are, sending strongly worded letters, tweeting, holding press conferences. I don't know about you, but it feels like not enough.
I, Roberta McQuay, give in faith and stand in unity with the vision of Perfecting Church of sowing this seed of $1,000 plus $235 and receiving the blessings to come to all that participated.
Now that's only $1,200.
Yes.
Y'all not listening to what I'm saying. If you have 1,000 plus 1,000.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna work on the other 800.
Well, that ain't what I asked you to do. Now listen to me. We're going to do this a couple of ways. Those that have the 1,000 plus 1, that means you're coming with your 1,000 that you're giving, plus you've asked someone else to give. Now you don't have to stop at 1,000, and we're going to deal. So in other words, if you say, Pastor Winans, I'm coming with my 1,000 plus another 3,000, then you'll say that. You understand? And if you didn't get the plus 1, but you maybe came with $250, you're going to come say that this is my 1,000 plus 250. You with me? And we're going to go all the way down. So I need you, in order for this to work, I need you to come when you're called with the offering that you're bringing. If listen to me. If you come and say, here's my 1,000, and you don't have a plus, we're going to have time for that. And I want you to come with joy. I want you to come with excitement, because as you give to God, God gives back to you. Because even before we start, we already have about $150,000 in. I need somebody to give God praise. Ah! Lord have mercy.
This video has already been making the rounds and a lot of people have commented on it. I'm going to be talking true about how egregious this guy's behavior was, but also about what I think is the real problem, and that is when institutions go into decay. Why did the civil rights movement not translate into established power for the black community? It was a revolution, to be sure, with powerful ideas, but as Stephen Kotkin said, after a revolution, it's not the ideas that carry over. It's the institutions. This was certainly the case in both the American and French revolutions. In the 13 colonies, there was already a Congress and business leaders, we plantation owners, so they already had both a governmental and economic structure in place before they declared war on Britain. So after the revolution, that's what took over. But what institutions did we have at the time of the civil rights movement? What institutions did we have that would carry over afterwards? Well, we had what we always had, the church. But as I've explained, and you know full well, the church came to be overwhelmingly important in our community because it was set up that way on the plantations. Back in the day, that's what you had. You would have Massa Charlie and Miss Polly show up so that they could have their trusted slave go ahead and deliver the Sunday sermon, which was meant to keep all the slaves in check. Nat Turner was a preacher before he woke up and started using the scriptures as a blueprint for revolution. Is it any wonder that there's always been this unholy alliance between the preacher men in the community and the white political power structure?
Here's a list of things I find worthy of revolution. Number one, the American government not having enough money for just basic safety net protections for Americans, but having enough money to give Israel's entire population free healthcare, free education, and retirement benefits to their veterans. Giving that to another nation and not your own citizens kind of feels like a slap in the face. Revolution. Number two, the fact that people are starving in the world when there's 10 people with a combined wealth of $1.6 trillion. I don't think you should be allowed to have that much money when people are starving. Revolution. Number three, Governor Mike Braun saying that interracial marriage should be left up to states' rights. Isn't that the same thing they said about slavery? That's insane. Revolution. I cannot believe he said that. Number four, you could save $10,000 per day for 82,000 years, and you still wouldn't have as much money as Elon Musk. But sure, he deserves a tax break. Revolution. Number five, police officers still getting their pensions after getting caught diddling children, and they can go to another police department and continue doing their job. I can't believe that's a true thing I can say out loud. Revolution. Number six, VAs across the nation are reporting critical level staff shortages because of the cuts to the VA. But we care about veterans, right? Even though you voted to cut their funding. Revolution. Number seven, apparently you're allowed to beat an officer within an inch of his life and get a complete pardon from the President of the United States, but throwing a sandwich at one gets you thrown in prison. These are the same people that claim to be the party of law and order. Revolution.
Revolution. So hopefully you got that this is where we are today. Like, these are the things that are happening. This is the state of the union, as they would say, right? So we're going to get into it. But first, I want to say hello to people. Auntie is here first. She says, hi, my favorite auntie. Leon is here. He says, what's up? What's up, Leon? And the Dems have been supporting the right the whole time. Vincent is here. Hi, Vincent. Andrea is here. Hi to you as well. Leon's got a lot, but Leon's always a good resource for lots of information. You said he's 7 minutes behind. I'm sure you'll catch up. For sure, for sure. Let's see who else is here. Adric is here. He's late for class. It's okay, Adric. You're here when you're supposed to be. Spain Man is here. He wants to know why folks fall for that, and it always amazes him. Me too. Me too. I want to know why, but I fell for it for quite a while. And greetings to you as well. All right, so this is the best live tribe on YouTube, bar none. So if you're watching from the clouds, please feel free to say hello. You will be welcomed as long as you're appropriate. And shout out to the replay gang. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up my guest, Adrian Hicks. He is always much better at historical information than I am, and we have so much to talk about with this, which is why I say it's probably just one in a series. But let's bring up Adrian. Hi, Adrian.
Hey, how we doing?
Good. Thank you for being here. Sounds like your mic is real fuzzy.
How about now?
Oh, it's great. That's perfect.
Okay. Excellent.
Okay, so
Excellent.
I'm
Excellent.
sorry, please continue.
Oh, I was just saying hey to the live tribe, and I apologize if my gaze is a little diverted, just because I'm trying to get an important piece of information up and at the ready. So, but again, I'm happy to be here.
And we're happy to have you. Okay, so the first thing that we want to talk about is, MAGA is based on Make America Great Again, right? And
Right.
so we want to talk about Trump's not the first one who used this as a tagline. The first person to use this as a tag, as a political campaign, was Reagan.
Ronnie.
So, I'm sorry, what?
I said Ronnie, good old Ronnie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, the thing is, though, what a lot of people may not have caught is the word again, right? There's a lot of timing with Reagan. This was on purpose. So, when Reagan began using this, let's make America great again in like 79 and 80, he was addressing a nation that was only 15 years into the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
So this is all in the wake of busing controversies, affirmative action, urban uprisings, and still under the COINTELPRO fallout, where Black activists and leaders were systematically targeted. So when Reagan said again, it implicitly referenced a time before all of those shifts. So a time when we had white dominance, socially, politically, economically, and it was unchallenged. Labor unions were strong for white men, but they excluded everybody else. Federal programs like the GI Bill had already created massive white wealth gaps. So the again operated as a dog whistle to the racists, right? Even
Right.
if polished with some patriotic optimism, right? It evoked this mythic America of stability and order, which was coded for pre-civil rights, is what he was going for.
Mm-hmm. And I think even that has, and I'm sure we'll get into it. A lot of that can be punctuated by what Lee Atwater said in that hot mic incident during Ronald Reagan's campaign in 1980. About how you can't just say the N word directly. You have to be a lot more abstract with your wording to be able to evoke images that some people fully understand, and it goes over the heads of others.
Right. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for being here. And thank you to Adrian Copoy for the $9.99 super chat. He said it's the Adrian Hicks tax.
I appreciate that, Adrian.
It makes me wonder, is that $9.99 supposed to go to you, or is it payment to me for having you on?
It's to you. It's to you. I wouldn't be here if not for you. So I appreciate it.
We may
and I appreciate you, Adrian.
We can get like a pizza with it.
There we go.
Okay. So Reagan, it wasn't just romanticizing the past. It's always this Make America Great Again just romanticizes the 50s, right? It's racial nostalgia. But Reagan's policies actively reversed civil rights gains. He was actively trying to do this. And so he cut social programs that had been safety nets for poor and minority communities. And this is what, just as a sidebar, this is always what makes me wonder about poor white people, is that the government doesn't view them any differently than the way that they view Black people and other minorities. They have the same disdain and feel the same way about them. And they're treated terribly. And yet, it's that convince the lowliest white man. How does that go? That he's better than the best?
Yeah, LBJ was credited with saying that if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best black man, I'm paraphrasing, that he won't even notice that you're picking his pocket.
Right. And so, that's one of the most successful things that they did was to convince these poor white people that they're better than their next door neighbors that live in the low income apartments or the low income housing or the trailer parks. Like the black guy that lives next to you, somehow you're better than him when you're in the same exact place in the same exact state.
And pardon me for kind of bouncing around. I know that a lot of this stuff is going to have other ties and it's going to tie into other parts of this conversation. But we're talking about a Republican Party. There's another piece of this, right? That just kind of came to me just right now. We're also in the midst of the Southern strategy, and the midst of political realignment, right? We're coming out of that. Democrats as conservatives into Dixiecrats brought on by Strom Thurmond, going into a poll shift from Democratic conservatives to Southern Democrats to full-on Republicans. Right? There's a whole shift happening, to where people who were Democrats are now going to be Republicans, not only the politicians, but the rank and file citizens as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of like a spoiler alert for when we're going to get to the Overton window, but you see it literally. No, stop. Between the both of us, we're going to be all over the place, but
all over the place.
Yeah.
This time period was a mess, an absolute mess. The more that I look back at it, it's just an absolute mess.
So Leon says poor whites to upper class white are treated like mixed mongrels or mixed mongrels, but I think it's mixed mongrels.
Yeah, it's mongrels is what he's looking for.
And I can see that. And you and I have talked about how the government is so paternalistic and, has favorite children. And, the farther you go down the line of favorites, it starts not mattering. If your daddy's 7th favorite or 8th favorite, it just, there's no difference. Daddy doesn't care. That's what it means. No. So some other things going on under Reagan, the war on drugs policies expanded incarceration, while Iran-Contra covertly funded the Contras through drug channels that fed the crack epidemic in Black neighborhoods. So they were funneling crack and they were creating the crack epidemic to fund the Contras.
Right.
And at the same time doing a war on drugs. So this is like a double-ended thing, right? They can squeeze all the money out of the Black community through selling crack and getting people addicted to crack, and then make all of it super illegal, and then put people in prison, and then they get to use you as slave labor.
Yeah, and the part about sentencing disparities as well as putting people into prisons is part of one of the earlier MAGA Dems, which would be Joseph R. Biden, with all of his I can't think of it right now, his crime laws. But when you were talking just a moment ago, I was looking up something that I had posted online. And I don't know if you did this first and I just copied it and put it up, but people with 6 teeth defending people with 8 yachts. Welcome to America.
Yeah. I think I saw that. I didn't post it, but okay. Yeah. I mean, it goes along with it. So Reagan also opposed sanctions on apartheid South Africa. And look at who Trump is throwing open the doors for on these immigrants, right? Is the Afrikaners, right? So that was his foreign policy priority, right?
Right.
Was to support South African whites.
Because again, you can't just say the N-word out loud, right? But I can do these performative gestures to let people know exactly whose team I'm really on, and even now, what is it? Trump just announced yesterday that He may do military action against Nigeria over the
Yeah.
persecution of the Christians. It's
Yeah.
interesting. He's willing to do that military action, but the persecution of the Palestinians for the last 2 years, we can't have any real involvement in, except for to accelerate the bulldozing of these people into dust.
Right. And I'm not great at numbers, but it's something like 3,000 Nigerians who were killed compared to tens of thousands,
hundreds of thousands at this point,
of Palestinians,
mm-hmm.
right? Hundreds of thousands at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's that picking and choosing, right? Reagan also destroyed unions. Like he fired 11,000 air traffic controllers in 1981. Isn't it weird that air traffic controllers are coming up now? Like, how did we come full circle?
Well, and I meant to try to grab an article from that, and if there's an opportunity for me to kind of zip over to my resources here and pull that up, we're still dealing with the firing of those 11,000 air traffic controllers today. We're still
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the fallout of that right now.
And they're not paid very well, from what I understand.
Well, right now they're not being paid at all because of the government shutdown.
Yeah. So, when Reagan says "Make America Great Again," it wasn't about this like benign restoration of the country, right? It was retrenchment. It's all about renewal, but it's retrenchment of white male money with their political power, right?
Well, and to talk about the mess that we were in for the period of that decade, I mean, we're talking about the Republican Party that's in realignment, and they're reeling from all of the gains, made. I mean, let's just call it mainly by blacks in this country, that they're trying to retake. I mean, so you have Chief Justice John Roberts, who was a Reagan attorney during Reagan's administration, who his whole mission was taking apart the Civil Rights Act, and specifically the Voting Rights Act, all throughout the 80s. Now he's a Supreme Court justice. And, now we're looking at, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act now, and that's on the table. I mean, this is all, a 50-year by design process.
Right. And the thing I was going to bring up when you said, primary is black people, right, that made these gains, is because it was civil rights movement that allowed immigration from other countries to be happening on a bigger scale. For some countries at all. But this bigger scale was because of the civil rights gains that Black Americans made. Like they made it possible for other people to seek refuge here, to try to come to America for a better life. So, up until that time, the United States was primarily white people and black people. And yes, there were some Asian people. There were, of course, Native Americans, but they had all been moved onto reservations or assimilated in. And so there really were, white people and black people, who were, black people were trying to get the civil rights and white people were trying to not let it happen.
Well, and while I'm sympathetic to the idea of the 65 Immigration Act that you're talking about, which kind of opened up the gates, if you will, to other to other non-whites and ADOS blacks to come into the country, I kind of see the 65 Immigration Act as an intentional opportunity to dilute the political upward mobility of blacks in America by letting in all of these other groups that could potentially become buffer groups in between the white establishment and black upward mobility, and we're seeing that now.
It was sort of like there was already a caste system, but there was like essentially 3 to 4 groups. By
Right.
bringing in these buffer classes, it pushed Black people down into like a permanent underclass
Right.
because they could plug all these other ones in that buffer white people from any blowback,
Right.
And we also have to be thinking about in this time, we're also coming off of, we had Vietnam and we had, which we lost, and they don't even teach that in school. We lost, and we pay reparations. But we had, the hippie movement. We had massive amounts of, people marching in the streets and holding signs and doing sit-ins, and shout out to Auntie. And, there was a lot of much more liberal momentum that was happening. The anti-war, anti-racist, it was very liberal movement. And as we see, when liberals or progressives start gaining momentum, then these, ultra conservatives have to come in and the backlash. You know what I mean?
I
Okay.
agree.
And Kevin says, in my opinion, it was done to dilute Christian values. I don't necessarily think it has anything to do with that, because the founders literally said they didn't want religion to have anything to do with the governing of the country. And I think, in a lot of ways, Christianity was used against people as a mechanism of control. So I don't think they would do anything to sort of dilute that. What I think they would do is, as people come in, much like they say you have to speak English, it would be like, American and Christianity is the same as baseball and apple pie. You got to find a church and you got to plug in where you can get in, as far as Christianity is concerned.
So let me understand what you're just mentioning right now with the dilution of Christian values, according to what Kevin was talking about. I guess I missed that part a little bit.
Well, I mean, it was just a statement he said. I thought it was what he was talking about was immigrants, but he also says mainly Christians were sent to Vietnam. I don't know. I haven't seen those stats. So Kevin, if you can, because that would be really interesting to see, if you can put where we can find those stats, like the religious makeup of people who were drafted, people who went to Vietnam in comparison to the general population, that would be great to see.
Well, I mean, let's think about this. That was, we're talking about the early to middle 60s into the early 70s.
Everybody was Christian.
Everybody was pretty much Christian in the United States. So, I mean, to the extent that anybody was anything else, most people were Christian. But when we talk about the MAGA movement, and hopefully I'm on the right page here, but when we talk about the MAGA movement, Christians are pretty much the tip of the spear.
Right. The Christian nationalists are the tip of the spear. Now, they're not the spear. And a lot of us, because that's what's forward facing, that's what we see. A lot of people think that all MAGA is Christian nationalists, and it absolutely is not. And that's what that's why we're having this show, to show that there is more behind the tip of that spear.
Yeah. In fact, when we get to 1980, we're focusing on Reagan for the sake of discussion, but really, we're talking about in 1980. We're talking about Reagan versus Jimmy Carter, right? But almost no one talks about the Ed Clark campaign, which included one particularly important figure, which is David Koch. We talk about the Heritage Foundation in 1973. Well, David Koch was the vice presidential candidate in 1980. And when we take a look at what was on his political platform, it's exactly the same stuff that's in Project 2025 today. So, there was another wing of conservatism that probably didn't see Reagan as conservative enough So the Clark campaign in 1980 would probably, in my opinion anyway, and I can be wrong, that's fine, would probably, in my opinion, be what I would deem proto-MAGA.
Oh yeah. So and just for anybody watching who's never been with me before, I always have tons of notes in front of me because squirrels. You know,
And
no, see,
I'm pulling a Maggie today. I'm shuffling between a stack of papers and 3 different screens in front of me. So,
well, one of the things I want to talk about before we got off of Reagan and into heritage, because that is a through line. Heritage is a definite through line, even before Reagan. But before we get there, one of the things that I wanted to point out is the Black people that Reagan and his lot took advantage of could not really have the power to hold him accountable for all the crap that he was doing to them if their rights were being taken away. So while he's taking advantage, he's also taking away. He's defunding community programs and education. He's criminalizing inner city economies through the drug war, right? And even media framing crack versus cocaine. Cocaine was what you did at Studio 54. It was these young hip kids, right? But crack is the junkie in the Black neighborhood who's sitting under a street light, acting weird. That was how it was, framed.
And I saw firsthand the effects of crack in my neighborhood. I don't talk about it a lot, but my own mother had a dependency issue in the 80s. I'm a half century old, so when we talk about the crack era, we are talking about my childhood, and even in a little Midwest town like Wichita, Kansas, we still dealt with that, heavy. And I saw basically, I lost my mother twice. I lost her officially in 2020. She died in a car accident after having kicked her drug habit. But I lost her a long time ago, because of the fallout of Reaganomics policies and Iran Contra and all of this other nonsense. So that's a very it's a very important part of my development as an individual, is seeing firsthand the effects of those policies in that period of time.
And even though it was proven that by recordings that Reagan knew what was going on and he was an architect of that plan, he's never held accountable.
Everybody knew. I mean, and I see Adric's comment in the chat, but correct me if I'm wrong, Adric, but what we used to say in the neighborhoods is that Black people didn't have boats and planes to bring this stuff over here. So, this is the early 80s we're talking about. If we're, okay, so you're just a moment ago you mentioned that Ronald Reagan is taking away all of these programs and things like that. And again, we'll get into it, at some other point in this conversation, but all of that is an extension of Richard Nixon's pivot. There's a fork in the road in 1968. We could have gone one of two directions, and Nixon chose the other direction, and that's why we are where we are now. There's a lot of reasons for that. But we're talking about, and I often ask other Black folks in the community, when were we ever free? When did we get free? Right? What you'd read in the history books is that we were free as of 1865, but freedom means that you're free to move about the cabin and live a fruitful life and work where you want and do what you want. But we existed in a whole nother 100-year period of that not happening. So freedom for Black people pretty much came somewhere around 68 to 72. I always tell people, go back and look at what was happening in 68 to 72. Those are the pivotal years. These are when we got free, right? So we're talking about 68 to 72. And then Reagan comes along in 80. How long have Black people been free at that point? A decade, 12 years, maybe? And you're already taking this stuff back. And in fact, that had already started with Nixon in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, right? So you're already taking programs back from a group of people who have not yet been able to fully take advantage of the freedom or the programs, and fast forward to today, you have John Roberts talking about, well, America's a different place now, and when are these when is the Voting Rights Act, as an example, just one example, when is that going to have run its course? Well, it runs its course when the people are fixed that
Right,
you
when
broke.
it's no longer necessary to have it.
Right. Anyway,
So,
sorry for
what
the
it's making me
soapbox
think
there.
of is right after quote unquote abolition, because I talk about this all the time. Slavery is not outlawed in the United States. You saw Black people being voted into positions of power, right? Governors, mayors, Congress, and they're making these huge strides, huge gains. And the same thing happened then. Oh, no, we can't have that. So immediately, reversing all these things, putting all these barriers in place, and taking away all of the rights that Black people had as soon as they were freed from chattel slavery. And so, that's something I bring up too, is that free from chattel slavery does not mean free. There are very few people in this world, in the whole world, who are as free as wealthy white men. Wealthy white men are the only people in the world that we live in right now who are free. And so, again, if you look at that caste system, those levels of freedom are directly proportional to that caste system.
Yeah, I can already see this is going to be a pretty gigantic conversation. It's going to take
What
a
are we
few.
on page 4? And we're 45 minutes in.
I mean, are we on page 4? I haven't flipped past page 1 in my notes just yet.
Listen, I am. You have a lot more notes than I do. So,
well, I don't know if I have a lot more notes than you do, but there's just, how you watch those detective shows where there's like the pegboard up in the background and there's all these strings being right. That's what this is.
Oh, for
Because
sure.
really what we're doing right now is we're not just talking about, I mean MAGA Dems would be a pretty easy conversation to have. We want to talk about, Kristen Sinema, Joe Manchin, and Fetterman, as just a few. And then, there's the closet MAGA Dems, that we can talk about with, I know that you're going to bring up the Congressional Black Caucus. But anyway, it's like, how did this cesspool start?
Right. We have to go through all of this historical information to even have the full picture of what is MAGA. To even be able to say, how are these Democrats being MAGA? Now, Kevin said, Reagan the movie star, Trump the TV star, looks more like figureheads. And there's so much about Reagan and Trump that are connected. A lot of this is maybe he fashions himself as another Reagan. I don't know, but that's where we can see that real, Nixon, yes, but the real connection starts with Reagan and this movement, and that's what starts moving the Overton window. And so like Reagan codified all of these repressive things, and Trump came in and is making things permanent. It's kind of like Roe versus Wade, which whatever you feel about it, I'm just talking about from a legal perspective. The Democrats had all this time to codify that into law instead of it just being a Supreme Court decision, right? This is why it could be easily overturned in the Supreme Court, because it was never codified into law.
Well, and specifically,
Again,
it was a very, I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
No, I was just going to say, I'm not getting into the morality of it. I'm just using it as an example, as one of many things that the Dems just didn't do anything with.
Mm-hmm. I think you call it feckless leadership and hand wringing.
Feckless hand wringing.
Okay,
that's all the Dems do is feckless hand wringing. Oh my God, and you better vote for me or you're gonna this, that, and the third. And then, you end up being offered Kamala Harris, which should be, everything that she does should be Republican. She takes money from AIPAC. She was in support of the genocide. She was a prosecutor. She put moms in jail for truant kids.
Truancy laws.
How the hell was she a Democrat? So, that's just a small example. But, now we have Trump making these laws and criminalizing things, right? Instead of, the war on drugs and these, now homelessness is illegal. Poverty itself is criminal conduct. And that kind of harkens back to vagrancy laws, right? Because they didn't like to see Black people stand around or stand in groups and talk. Oh, God, no. They're going to put you in prison for that. After BLM, there were 100 anti-protest bills that were proposed nationwide. Some of them allowed drivers to run over protesters who blocked the road. Crazy. Then we have, targeting Democratic cities and saying, oh, well, they're war torn and we all have eyes. Oregon is not war torn. There are people in blow up costumes doing the electric slide to protest.
I want to interject real quick. I see what you say there, Leon. And you're absolutely right. But even before Joe Biden, you have to remember that before Barack Obama was elected in November 2008, for the 2009 election, he said day one that he was going to codify Roe v. Wade. They asked him a week later why it hadn't happened, and he said, "Oh, well, we got other priorities."
Bill Clinton could have done it.
Yeah.
When we look at when we were talking about Peltier in another show that I did, right? He had all of these Democratic presidents who kept promising him they would commute his sentence and, and tell his supporters, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then it just never gets done.
Mm-hmm.
They do the same lying and false promises that all politicians do.
Yeah. And, I believe that there's reasons for that. Obviously, you and I have talked before, when not on YouTube about, the two major motivators for somebody casting a vote is either going to be fear or anger. And so you have one group that comes in and does all the draconian stuff, takes all the stuff, and, runs over protesters and things like that, drums up all the fear and anger. The other group sits back and just waits for the scared and angry people to come and vote for them, and they don't have to offer any policy. And then for their tenure, you get incrementalism, which angers a certain group of folks to then vote the other way. You think about the Bernie bros, a lot of them flipped for Trump, right? When they were progressive. That's a whole nother story. But a lot of them flipped for Trump, and then go that way because they're these disaffected, unhappy, citizens that are out there. So we just have this constant swinging back and forth. But the one thing that doesn't change is, lifelong Congress people, lifelong senators, how long has, or how long had Pelosi been in her seat? Who was Feinstein? Feinstein basically went brain dead while in office.
Oh, yeah.
How is that possible? People are being dragged out of there on stretchers because they're 90 plus years old, right? You got the turtle looking guy on the Republican side. I can't ever think of his name, right? Who just glitches and freezes up looking at the camera, right? Because his
Mitch
mind is gone.
McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, thank you.
Yeah.
Those guys never change, and they just anyway. I'm sorry.
Well, I want to say, Kevin said it's got nothing to do with skin color, but greed. Not many wealthy white men in charge in China, and so on. So, Kevin, I'm going to push back a little bit because, first of all, the United States caste system is built upon white European supremacy. It was built upon that, and it has continued through to present time. And I could, we could spend hours. I mean, we could probably do a 6-hour show just giving examples of why that is the case and how we are where we are now. That is the caste system of the United States. There is a specific caste system in China. And there are beliefs in China about being as light-skinned as possible, as white, right? You had women who would put literal white makeup on their faces. You had people in Latin America who Adrian knows the statement for this, but it's where they absolutely want their sons and daughters to marry white people to make their bloodline white.
Yeah, improve the race.
Yes. And, we've seen videos of Hispanic grandmas throwing absolute destructive hissy fit because the grandbaby had a black baby doll. Mm-hmm. So we see this through line of white supremacy being mixed in with this oligarchical nature, even with technates, we see, because, Bill Gates asking for a culling and, referencing eugenics, like it is there, right? It has to do with skin color globally, but specifically in the United States, that's what our caste system is built upon. In India, there's a whole other caste system, right? And guess what? The people on the top, the Brahma, are lighter skinned than the people on the bottom, to the point where when you get closer to the bottom of the caste system, at times it's hard to differentiate between if somebody is African or Indian. So these things are there, and we have to, yes, these are greedy, wealthy men, but they have always stood on the backs of Black people, poor whites, and women. But these are stair steps for them.
Yeah, and we can't, both of you are obviously right, 100%. We know that it's about greed because, even at one point, what was it? Ben Franklin had considered Swedish people as swarthy. Yeah. So there was always this idea of what is white and what isn't. And somehow, and I used to work for Volvo, so I've seen a lot of Swedes. Those are some white people. They're like white, you know what I'm saying? And but they weren't white enough to be considered white in the early days of America because of the caste system, right? But what did the Catholic Church set up when Spain had first come over or sent, the Christopher guy over here to the Caribbean? What did they institute? The limpieza de sangre, which is translated as the cleanliness of blood. Okay, so there was definitely a hierarchy that was dependent upon race. Now, again,
just to interject, and the first thing they did was go around and label all the people who were here. That was the first thing by racial categories. And, that's pre-United States. That's European takeover. So race has always been central to our identity as Americans. Go
Right.
ahead.
So there was a time period in which Irish people were not white,
Correct.
and then there's
And
a time
Italian
period in which they were, and Italians as well,
and
you
Jews.
know, and Jews. So, and I think Jews just maybe not too long ago achieved their whiteness. Congrats.
Well, the Ashkenazi ones,
The
yeah.
Ashkenazi ones, right?
Right, because you're not going
Um,
to have, Igbo Jews who would be considered
so while I
white.
agree, that this the underlying thing is greed and money and class, the mechanism by which people are programmed to be able to organize themselves into their class or caste is race.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most pervasive thing that we use. Because again, you and I talked about this on one show before. Why do we not have state-sponsored health care?
Well, and the reason that other people have even said is because then Black people would have free healthcare.
Right, because the folks who had originally framed it way back, and I'm talking about in the early 1900s, they're already having conversations about state-sponsored healthcare because areas like Germany have had it since 1870. But over here, you have Black people. And the folks who were thinking about having state-sponsored healthcare here were like, yeah, but then that would mean Black people would get healthcare. So maybe if we just hold back on that, Black people would die off. That's literally the information. But lo and behold, we didn't. And we're still here.
Well,
And
Kevin
that
says Nancy
same,
Pelosi is not a man, but an awfully greedy person. And I think,
Sure.
yes, but you also have to keep in mind that white women historically have been the best attack dogs and protectors of white supremacy. Look back at,
Suffragette.
desegregation and those little kids walking into the school. It wasn't white men who were standing along the sidewalk saying, that shouldn't happen. Those white men were, trying to do politics to make laws about it, including Biden, who was anti desegregation because he's that freaking old. But it was women, white women were calling these small children terrible things, throwing rocks at them, spitting on them.
Mhm.
So
Or
when
before
you
that,
have a token number of people being let into the big boy club, but they never have enough to have a power in wherever they're let in. Letting in a white woman into that sphere is not going to change the political power, but it helps Democrats to look like they're super duper inclusive.
Mhm. Or even before we're talking about the images of the civil rights, Maggie, what was it around World War I? You had a lot of Black men for the first time that were out of country in theater. They're sending back resources to their families, so now the wives in those households didn't have to be domestics, right? So then there became a shortage of domestics. So what did the white community at that time do? They started to pass laws that made it illegal for Black women to be stay-at-home moms. They had to work.
Right.
Had to work. And so then the question is, well, who would have been tugging at the heartstrings of those politicians at the turn of the century to pass those types of laws? It would have to been their wives, because they're the ones giving up the domestic, and they're the ones then having to rear their children or wash the dishes or cook the meals or iron the clothes or whatever.
And this is the period of time that Make America Great Again references, is when Black women were forced by law to be domestic servants in white people's homes. Now, Kevin says Maxine Waters is not white, but she's still a gatekeeper. We're definitely going to get into that. That is on the
It's
list.
on the menu.
Right. And I don't want anybody to take it as that I'm saying that all white people are some kind of way, or all men are some kind of way, or all white men are some kind of way. There is a specific oligarchical group of people who utilize race and always have in the structure of this country. And white men can and have been victims of that as well. Just because you're white and you're male doesn't mean you automatically, here's your $1 billion. Somebody like Elon Musk, you saw it, you could save $10,000 a day for 82,000 years, and you still wouldn't have as much money as Elon Musk. So how does he view somebody who makes $60,000 a year? Trash. He doesn't care what you have to say at all. At all.
Right.
So,
well, the thing I want to interject there also, Maggie, is that, history is a thing. It happened. There were people who were instrumental in making things happen. If those people just so happen to be Black, white, Jewish, Hispanic, Asian, whatever it is, it's immaterial to the fact that that's just a description of the person who made the thing happen. Now, America pre-1965 was pretty much just a white and Black nation. So, there were people who were driving the bus, and there were people who were sitting on the back of it.
Mm-hmm. So, Kevin, all I'm going to say, Adrian says Google is your friend, but that is actually false. It's a talking point of white supremacy. So we could do a whole show on that too, about the difference between indentured servitude slavery and chattel slavery. But that's not what this show is about. So.
Yeah, and also because I did see that comment, and that's fine. This whole series of conversations and videos is just meant. I think, Maggie, you like to say, let's discover the universe together.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's conversational. Nobody is a bad person or whatever for believing whatever it is that they believe. It's just that we are trying to expose and look behind the curtain at what America really is, what the world really is, and bring facts instead of just the talking points that we've all been fed.
Because end of day, I don't know Kevin Thompson, even though we have similar last names, but I don't have anything against you, because the thing is that we have all grown up under indoctrination, and you can't research literally everything all the time. You can't. And so we're all going to repeat talking points and things that we've heard or we learned, like, Washington had wooden teeth, because you can't know everything all the time. But we all have to be open to it if we are talking to somebody who maybe did do the research. Didn't we already do a show? Okay, I'm gonna have to go let my dog out. It's literally echoing through the computer. So I'm gonna let you take over for a minute.
Well, I don't know ultimately where she would want me to go in her stead, as it is her show. But again, I'm just gonna say what I said a moment ago, which is that we're all on a journey. I hope anyway, together, to try to get to the bottom of things and get to the truth of whatever a particular subject matter is. I tell my friends all the time that everything that we've learned up to this point is a lie, and that's a very freeing statement for myself. And for me, I guess my personality is, when I see something that's patently false, that I've believed my whole life, then that sends me down a rabbit hole of, well, what else is false? What else do we need to dig up? And usually that one thing that's false, then it breadcrumbs me to some other facet of history. And then the next thing you know, you've gone back, 400 years to find out what the origin of this thing is.
And I did do a show about this, because I remember talking about the indentured servitude that the Irish had to go through, you didn't have to make it worse by calling it slavery and saying they were enslaved first. Like
It was
the
already bad enough.
indentured servitude that they had, the crap that they went through was heinous and it was terrible. And there were other white, but very poor white people who were sold into indentured servitude that didn't come from Ireland. Because it would be my great grandmother and her little sister being an example of that, and the heinous stuff they went through. That indentured servitude was awful. It was different than chattel slavery, though. It was not the same thing. And so there, you didn't have to try to make indentured servitude sound worse by calling it slavery or making it seem like it was chattel slavery. It's awful on its own. It doesn't have to be lumped in. And even so, saying that Irish people went through it first doesn't negate any of the atrocities and horrible things that happened to enslaved Africans. So that's why it's one of those things. But that was the show. So yeah, and Kevin, he totally gets it. You know, he's talking about being brainwashed, being programmed, and we all got to do these things and we got to do it together. But what I was going to say was we're an hour in and we're getting
and we haven't even started yet. Yay.
I know. We're getting ready to make the pivot to the Heritage Foundation. And so this may be a good point to end part one so that on part two, we can start with the history of the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, you know, where it came from, even more similarities with Reagan and Trump, where the Heritage Foundation is concerned, and sort of moving forward in this historical review. And eventually, probably part three, we'll get to the criteria for what makes somebody MAGA. And so then we can really discern people who call themselves Democrats, but they're MAGA.
Well, you know, again, since we're literally dealing with folks who say MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, what we're really investigating is the history of this country to this point.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's why this is so huge. I mean, we can talk about people who we deem as MAGA rhetorically, but you know, you can't even say the phrase without having to investigate the history of the country.
Right. And I don't, you know, lastly, I'm going to say, Kevin says every race has taken a beating, so we should unite. I don't know that that is true. I think there are some European whites and some Spanish whites who have not ever taken a beating, but that's very few people. I don't necessarily disagree, but that doesn't mean that we can't look at the history of our country and where we are right now and how things are not free and equal for Black people or Native American people. And so to just kind of do the kumbaya thing does them a disservice. Not that I'm saying you're wrong. I would love if we could all unite. Let's just get the racist on board. If we can get the racist to be on board and quit being racist and unite, I think that would fix a lot of things.
Yeah, and I first thing I want to say before I add my little 3 cents in is that I appreciate you, Kevin, for having the words to say, and you know it isn't it takes a certain level of bravery, even in an anonymous forum like the internet, to come in and maybe push back a little bit, and that's fine, and we we appreciate the pushback. You know, I often tell the people that I know, because I have a very diverse group of friends, I have friends and I don't have minions. So, you know, people are welcome to push back against the things it is that I say. But, you know, I'm reminded of, again, 1968 to 1972, in that time period. And that time period is reminiscent of other time periods, like, you know, around the time of what Maggie spoke about earlier, Reconstruction. America has had several opportunities to course correct. And it seems like we never do. And it's always around race.
Mm-hmm.
Again, with the, and I'll say this, I know that we'll get into it, Maggie, and further into the discussion as we get into other chapters of this, as this is now turning into War and Peace. You know, in that time period when Nixon ran, he could have taken the remedies and recommendations and proposals of the Kerner Commission that happened in 1968. He specifically chose not to. He specifically pivoted towards, this is the first time that we heard, I think, law and order, right?
Mm-hmm. The phrase law and order that now is another dog whistle.
War on drugs, that was also Nixon, right? And again, these are specific racialized pivots that he knew that he could gin up support from a certain group within America, not because he in good faith was wanting to try to fix America, but just his way. But specifically so, his group, which, fast forward 50 years, is the billionaires. His group stay in power, stay rich. Because, there's also another piece of this puzzle, which is turn of the century, 19th century. What were we doing? We were busting up the big, powerful corporations, the Gilded Age people. And those people want their money back. Those people want their money back, and they want their power back. And how do they get there? They use us fighting against each other. So in some way, Kevin, I do agree with you. In other ways, we can't deny the pervasiveness of race in this country as a means to an end that doesn't serve either Adrian or Kevin, but serves Elon and Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen and JD
Right.
Vance
And I
and all
think,
these others.
Something I would say about probably in closing in this video is that, just like I say in my Jew disclaimer, that pointing out what these oligarchical Zionist people are doing in the name of Judaism is to protect the everyday Jew, right? You have to point out what people are doing in your name, right? So like when you have white people who are gathering around whiteness, they ostensibly are doing that in my name because I'm phenotypically white, right? And so then I get lumped in with them, and that's not what I want. And most Americans are pretty moderate. They're not extremists. And so the thing about uniting is that if we could get all of these moderate people to see that we all believe the same thing, and we stop listening to that Black man is your enemy, that Hispanic woman is your enemy, your wife is your enemy, like the non-Christian is your enemy, or the Christian is your enemy. Like, we just have to not fall for these things, while also saying these are just facts. This is just the history of how we got here. It's not an indictment on the everyday white guy. It's an indictment on what people did who were in power to keep their power under the guise of whiteness and wealth and maleness, and then did everything they possibly could to convince the general population to believe what they wanted them to believe. So that's why we go through this.
And Maggie, to your point that you just made, the average white guy doesn't even know that he's being propagandized, thanks to Edward Bernays, right? So, there's so many layers to this onion, that, I mean, and that's and Edward Bernays, by the way, isn't my wheelhouse. That is specifically Maggie's wheelhouse, to talk about propaganda and how we're even utilized in that way. We're like sock puppets to these people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, and even talking about like this Christian nationalism, right? People are doing things in the name of Christianity that are so antithetical and just completely against the teachings of Jesus, of which Christianity is based upon. Like it's complete opposite. So they're doing things in the name of Christianity, which lumps the average Christian person into that group when they're just trying to be a good person and follow their faith or whatever, the same as the Jews. So, I think when we push back on each other, these are the things that we have to bear in mind, is that you could be wrong. I could be wrong. There are other things I have to take into account. And also, we can't force other people to believe what we believe or see what we believe or see what we see. So we're going to continue to do parts. Now, next Sunday, I'm going to do the Allies of Abolition show. I have promised some little ones in my life that I was going to do that. So we'll do that, and then we'll get back into part 2 of the MAGA Dems, moving into the Heritage Foundation, which is, around Nixon time again, because all of these through lines are important, and eventually we will get up to Project 2025 in the current times that we're in, and the MAGA Dems. So,
if I can say something real quick, Maggie.
Sure.
I do want to make sure to admonish and encourage everyone to go to Maggie's Patreon, because I plan to upload a lot of links to articles for the things that we're talking about. I don't ever want it to be a situation that, it's right because Adrian says so. That's definitely not how I act. I don't even like to talk unless I can, have something to refer back to. And, I'll put up all the links to, the articles and the research and things like that we've been doing to arrive to these conclusions. And it's just another way to be able to have some place where we can go back to and do our own independent research. So if you're not a part of Maggie's Patreon and you're interested in this topic, then you'll definitely want to go and support our wonderful Maggie.
That's very sweet. And thank you, Leon. I am not going to do the 5-hour stream today. Although we could. I literally think we could do 8 hours, honestly.
I'm not past page 1 yet on my notes.
Yeah.
So I got 16 pages here.
Yeah, we could do. But, Maggie expires after a while and we're already past the hour mark. I think 2 hours is as long as I will agree to go to. But thank you for the super chat. That's very sweet. So, upcoming this Wednesday, we're going to continue on with the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. But if I don't see you Wednesday, I will see you next Sunday for the Allies of Abolition, which is talking about the white people who allied for abolition. So it's not just, all white people are racist. But we're going to go at teaching history a different way, because you know how the powers that be keep saying, oh, you're going to make white kids feel guilty. Well, only if you make them align with the enslaver instead of all the white people who were doing all kinds of good work to help Black people get their freedom. So we're going to talk about those people and give those white kids some heroes and role models to look at. So we'll do that. Then we'll come back, for a part 2. So before I forget, I love you. I miss you. You're my favorite. And now I'm going to show you a picture of my dog. Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric. helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. Let's uncover the universe together. And remember, think like you mean it, and know that Earth wants you here.